Hi, I'm Shannyn Rus, and we're here at the Alberta Railway Museum to talk about a little discovery that I made in my backyard. So a couple of years ago, I had started to get the idea to plant a garden. And what I ended up doing in the hamlet of Carbondale was putting my shovel in the ground, and I ended up finding bricks, just all of these bricks that are now on display at the museum. And they were a little bit strange, I think, when I found them. They made me a little bit curious and intrigued because of the stamp that was on them, which you can see as ACP. And what I ended up discovering in a Google search was that that stood for Alberta Clay Products. And Alberta Clay Products was a brick company down by Medicine Hat that actually caught fire. And that was many years ago as well, back in, I think it was the 1960s. So once I had realized that the brick building had burned down and that the bricks were probably as old as the building, I started doing a little bit more research, and that brought me to the Provincial Archives of Alberta, which led to pretty much all the information that you can find now at the Railway Museum. So I'll tell you the story, and then you'll see that it's titled Carbondale Railway Station, a series of tragic events. So once I tell you a little bit about the story, we're going to talk about the different tragic events that occurred and help you dig a little bit deeper into your curiosity. The Carbondale Railway Station was built in the hamlet of Carbondale, which is about 11 kilometers outside of Edmonton to the north. And once upon a time, it was the railway station for the Northern Alberta Railways, which was a joint venture between CP and CN. They operated throughout Northern Alberta from 1929 until 1981. However, the Carbondale Railway Station was decommissioned in 1961. So Carbondale was the junction where NAR's main line split, sending passengers and freight either west to Grand Prairie and Dawson Creek or east to Fort McMurray. The station was not only an en route stop of a number of destinations along the line, but since 1956, it was also the home to the Fraser family. The station agent was Arthur, or Art Fraser. He was married to Alice, and their youngest of 3 children, their son Kelly, was 18. Art was an active Jehovah's Witness and was a part-time boxer, and sometimes he was known for coming to work with a black eye after a fight the night before. Art and Alice's youngest son and daughter were living in Dawson Creek at the time of the accident. So the accident, this is one of the few head-on collisions that have happened between a diesel and a steam train, but it was the last head-on collision that happened in Canada between the outgoing steam train era and the new diesel power. On November 10th, 1959, the NAR passenger train number 2 was southbound behind CN steam locomotive 5115. They had left Grand Prairie the night before and they were destined for Edmonton. Number 2 passed through Morinville at about 7:51 a.m. and they were due for Carbondale at 8 a.m. While the passenger train was headed south, the NAR train number 31, led by NAR diesel locomotives number 202 and 208, and they had 119 freight cars with them. They left Edmonton behind schedule. It was quite a bit behind schedule, about an hour and a half late. In a rush to depart, they left the city at about 7:20 to 7:25. The records are different from each crew member on which time they left. So we have 2 trains that are on a timetable, which means they don't really have to check in at any station, and they're both running late and they're both on the main line. So this is a great hand-drawn map of the Northern Alberta Railways lines. And if you see here, it says Edmonton. So you can sort of see that it's a straight line from Edmonton to Carbondale. And where these 2 trains were supposed to meet was a couple stations down from Carbondale in Mearns. So you can see the direction in which this train was supposed to go, and where they met was right at the junction. So the plan was to side rail off here and then just allow the train to pass. However, that didn't happen. So because the train left late, they gave themselves very little time to get off the track. So they had about 10 minutes, and that's being a little bit generous, to get off of the main line so that the train could pass. However, when they pulled into Carbondale, there was a break in the main brake line of train number 31, which set all of the car brakes into emergency brake, making the train immovable until the breach in the airline was located. So somebody had to go and walk the train to see where the brake was. They did end up finding it 78 cars from the back, but it was a little bit too late. They also realized that 27 cars in, there was a broken knuckle. At this point, the train was sitting on the main line in two parts with a passenger train headed towards them. They also had an improperly placed tank car filled with gasoline directly behind the two engines, which just was a violation of all the operating rules about marshalling the cars. They set off a car. So basically how it was set up first was a diesel engine, and an empty box car, and then that tank car of gasoline that ended up getting moved forward when they removed that box car. And that was removed because of a brake line fault. So the crew did notice at Edmonton before the train left that that box car needed to be removed. Who knows what the fate of the station might have been had that boxcar been in the place of where the gasoline tank was. Several cars detached from the number 31. So what ended up happening when they got there is the brake line got tight, and it put brakes on all the cars. And so they were actually unable to move. And that left them as a sitting duck on the main line with the passenger train coming. So in a desperate effort and attempt to notify the oncoming passenger train, the brakeman from the freight train ran ahead to deploy an explosive warning device called a torpedo. So these torpedoes are just a little packet, and they're filled with gunpowder, and it's placed on the rail line. And what happens when a train runs over it is that it makes a big explosion. It's supposed to get the conductor, the engineer, a train man, a brakeman's attention so that they can realize that something might be ahead, like danger, and that they would need to apply their brakes and stop. Unfortunately, the torpedoes didn't get put as far as they should have. So as soon as they realized they weren't going to be able to move this train, somebody started running down the line. They got 500 meters down the line. Rules say they're supposed to get 2,000 meters down the line. So they obviously didn't get far enough. They did light a red fuse, which was set out, and those are expected to last about 10 minutes. Nobody noticed that as well. Just after 8 a.m., the trains collided at about 40 kilometers an hour, which is 25 miles per hour, making a sound described by a witness as atomic. The force of the collision actually moved the tender about 87 feet back on the line, so it was quite an impact that he experienced. The impact ruptured the tank car, causing a rapid spread of gasoline. So if you can imagine, there's a diesel engine, and then the first car after that is a tank car filled with gasoline. So it ruptured, it bent off the rail, and it cracked in half. And what happened is all of the gasoline spewed over the top of the station house. So the northwest corner of the station house caught on fire first, and then it was just immediately ignited in flames. The bodies of the Fraser family were found outside the home. Most don't think that they had an idea that this had happened, and that they had been blown outside, where they were found on the high wire fence. Albert Villeneuve was found in the buckled cab of the steam locomotive. So what witnesses say is that he made an attempt to jump free from the cab just before it made impact, and what ended up happening is that he got squished between the tender. Witnesses say the crash happened at precisely 8 a.m. as that's when all of the electric went out in Carbondale, and the clock stopped. Historic accounts show that the station was completely destroyed except for its fireproof safe and brick chimney. So the brick chimney you can see in the picture here, and that's the bricks that remain today, and that's what's left of the station. They also said in some testimony and records that I found from the Provincial Archives of Alberta that they would have waited to open the safe a little bit longer, because when they did, it was scorching hot, and they just didn't expect it to be so hot. So following the investigation, the entire crew of number 31, the freight train, was dismissed by the NAR for violating a number of operating rules. The engineer of the passenger train number 2 was also dismissed for not obeying the rule that the train be prepared to stop at the junction. So that's one of the things that went wrong. The conductor of train number 2 was severely reprimanded for not checking the signals at the junction and for failure to exercise proper supervision of the train. Part of it was the engineer and the conductor of the freight train were paid an extra half an hour to make sure that they checked the contents and the marshalling of their train cars. And they did absolutely have a right not to move their train if they didn't feel it was safe. So here we are with the bricks. So over 60 years later, time has passed since this tragic day, but what remains buried in the Carbondale station is beginning to reveal itself brick by brick. We haven't found any other artifacts related to the railway station, so I think this is what is going to be left behind. Today, these bricks are here at the Alberta Railway Museum as part of the collection of rail history not to be forgotten or buried again. Site of the Carbondale Railway Station. It's in Sturgeon County, and in the 80s, Sturgeon County went around and did a collection of all their historical sites and made sure that they were recognized. So this post is here, and it just shows that the station was here from 1913 until 1959 when the fire and explosion happened at this site. Okay, so this is the crossing. So on November 10th, 1959, train number 31 was coming from Edmonton. So this is towards Edmonton. So that train number 31 was coming north, and train number 2 was coming down from McLennan, heading south towards Edmonton. And the collision happened about 90 feet this way on the tracks. Back when this was a junction point here at Carbondale, there was a couple different tracks, and originally there was the main line, this line, and then an additional line. And just a little bit down this line were where the Alberta grain elevators were. So this was a spot where grain was loaded as well as where coal was loaded. So this was on the other side of the track, a coal mine. And it was pretty busy. In some of the historical documents, it says that about 100 men were in Carbondale at one time taking coal and putting it on the rail. So that's a lot of people, considering there's only about 70 residents right now. So this is still the only thing that's left above ground from the original site. And it's weird, but if you smell it, it smells like fire. And what you can see on here is just the remnants of the heat. So that's left here too. So on top of each telegraph line, and you can kind of see that they've fallen down over the years. So at the bottom of them are these little gems, and these are glass insulators. And they're not worth a lot of money, but what they are is just a little piece of the past, and it's pretty interesting to be able to find these things just actually all over Alberta. So if you're ever walking next to the rail line, not on it, and you see the telegraph line, just have a peek if they're missing any at the top, if they're sitting at the bottom of the pole. They're awesome. That's what you end up finding when you look at the bottom of a telegraph pole. It's pretty neat. There's one up here too. The original station was in this area right here. It was 25 feet by 50 feet, according to the plans and dimensions. So it would have lined the track and had the platform to go out and meet the track here. But this was the original site. When we got here, there's always, when you move to a new house, there's some talk, and I always wondered what it would be like to live next to a rail line. And I wondered about the safety. And I asked my in-laws who had lived here for decades longer if there had ever been an accident. And my mother-in-law knew bits and pieces of the story. And she's actually the one that was able to help us piece a little bits of things together. Like we knew we were looking for newspaper records at that point because she knew that there was an accident that had occurred. So we had the sign, we knew this was an original site, but without anywhere to start looking for information, it was good to sort of hear the stories that she had been told living here. Now that you've heard sort of all about the story of the accident, what I want to tell you now is a little bit about the power of the story. And the power of this story is that once it was told, we were able to connect with some of the surviving members of the Fraser family. And that was just the most heartfelt experience for us as a family because we were able to share the information that we had learned and gathered over the course of our research and just really connect over the phone and through letters, just talking about who the Frasers were and them getting to know us. And I guess the thing that we have most in common is that their family lived there and now mine does. So it's a really interesting piece of this story that I think we had hoped for and didn't expect to actually come to fruition. So we just wanted to say a special thank you from our family to the Fraser family for allowing us to share your story with the world.